Mangwanani Mwalepo Vukenjani Kekwas Wadawe Africa. Welcome to Africa. Good morning. It is Monday, the 11th of July. How are you feeling, Diana?
Cold.
Yes, yeah, feeling cold, but we certainly have, at least the hottest, latest news. Some of it might not be hot in that specific manner, but we will make sure we bring you news from Zambia when we cross over and talk to Mike Sichula. Then we'll also talk to Talent Gore and Zimbabwe just before we cross over to Arihohad in South Africa. And just keeping in mind, Namibia, congratulations, because the Valvichas have qualified for the 7th consecutive time for the Rugby World Cup. So lots to come in this broadcast.
And today just so happens to also be World Population Day. Now, World Population Day comes along each year to remind us that our present rate of population growth is unsustainable, and the present social and logistical issues that we are experiencing to meet the demand of the population will only get worse if we don't do something. Let's take a look at World Population Day. Chill Sessions is an entertainment show that brings you the latest hit, fashion, and entertainment news. If you would like to feature your brand or campaign on this platform, contact chill@synergy.com.na. Chill Sessions, bringing art and entertainment to the people.
Today is Monday, the 11th of July on Africa. Good morning, and these are the top stories. Soweto Tavern deaths rise to 15 as 2 dead shot in Katletlhong. Now, the death toll of a shooting at a tavern in Orlando East, Soweto, has risen to 15. The shooting took place at Mdlalose Tavern in the Nomzamo informal settlement in the early hours of Sunday. Several people were left injured, with 14 deaths initially being confirmed by the South African Police Service. It is reported that on Sunday at about 30 minutes past midnight, a group of men armed with rifles and 9mm pistols entered the tavern and started shooting randomly at the patrons who were sitting inside. 23 people were shot, 12 of whom were declared dead on the scene, while 11 were rushed to a nearby hospital. 2 more were later declared dead at the hospital, Gauteng Police Commissioner Elias Mawela said in a statement on Sunday. Earlier, Mawela told Newsroom Africa preliminary investigations have indicated armed suspects who fled in a Toyota Quantum opened fire at patrons in the tavern while they were enjoying themselves. All of a sudden, they heard some gunshots. Others thought it was outside. And then when they saw that some people are dropping dead inside, others pretended as if they are also injured or dead, he explained. The person or persons just fired randomly, so they didn't target anybody. It is clear that these people were determined. They wanted to kill.
Moving over to Sri Lanka, President Rajapaksa to resign after palace stormed. Sri Lankan President Gotv Rajapaksa has announced he will step down after protesters stormed his official residence and set the Prime Minister's house on fire. Neither the Prime Minister nor the President were in the buildings at the time. Hundreds of thousands descended on the capital, Colombo, calling for Mr. Rajapaksa to resign after months of protests over economic mismanagement. Mr. Rajapaksa will step down on 13 July. Prime Minister Wickremesinghe has agreed to resign. The Speaker of Parliament said the President decided to step down to ensure a peaceful handover of power and called on the public to respect the law. The announcement triggered an eruption of celebratory fireworks in the city. Political leaders are due to hold further meetings to discuss a smooth transition of power. Sri Lanka's military has appealed to people to cooperate with security forces to maintain calm. After Saturday's events, the United States appealed to the Sri Lankan leadership to act promptly to resolve the country's economic crisis.
Now, gun violence in South Africa does not seem to be subsiding at all, as one-year-old shot allegedly by mourners firing guns at gravesite in Mpumalanga. A one-year-old baby was shot allegedly by a stray bullet after mourners fired guns at a cemetery in Pinar outside Nelspruit, Mpumalanga, police said on Sunday. The child was injured whilst a funeral activity was being held at the cemetery on Saturday around 12:45. Police spokesperson Colonel Donald Mdluli said the family of the baby girl lived next to the cemetery in Tekwane North and that the child was playing outside the house. Gunshot sounds were reportedly heard coming from the nearby graveyard where there was a burial, and moments later the child was heard screaming. When her mother rushed outside to find out what was happening to her daughter, she noticed that the baby was bleeding on her lower body. The baby was then taken to a nearby clinic by a private vehicle, and the medical staff confirmed that she had a gunshot wound on her leg. However, the child had to be swiftly transferred to hospital. He said police are investigating a case of attempted murder and had launched a manhunt for the suspects.
Now in our next story, Kenya raises criminal age of responsibility to 12. Kenya has amended its law on children's rights, giving them more protection with a raft of changes, including raising the criminal age of responsibility from 8 to 12. The amendments, which were signed into law by President Uhuru Kenyatta on Thursday, also require legal representation for children who are in legal trouble or going through the court system. It stipulates that minor infractions by children should not be prosecuted through the courts, but be handled by community-based support networks. It also mandates that police stations have separate areas for children to prevent them being held in detention with adults. Other areas deal with the rights of a child to have parental care, though allows for separation if it is in the child's interest and makes it easier to organize adoption by a relative.
Paul Kagame to seek fourth term as president of Rwanda. Rwanda's leader, who has been in power for 2 decades, has said he would consider remaining in office for another 20 years. Paul Kagame told a French TV channel he would stand for president again at the next election in 2024. In 2015, he changed the constitution, allowing him to stay until 2034. In the last presidential election 5 years ago, official figures showed he won 99% of the vote, which many outside the country dismissed as a sham. Asked if he would seek re-election, Mr. Kagame, who is 64, said, "I would consider running for another 20 years. I have no problem with that. Elections are about people choosing." Human Rights Watch's Central Africa Director Louis Mudge told the BBC what comes as a surprise is that some people are indeed surprised. Now, one prominent Rwandan critic stated that if he continues for another 20 years, Rwanda will be real hell. Mr. Kambanda says Rwandans already live in a climate of fear and alleges that more than one minister has told him that they remain in government because they fear being assassinated if they leave. That brings us to the end of the first half of our top stories. More news after the break.
You're watching Africa Good Morning. Now getting into the second half of our top stories. We start off in Morocco, where EU and Morocco vow more cooperation after migrant deaths. The European Commission vowed on Friday to step up its work with Morocco to fight people smugglers following the deaths of 23 people at the Morocco-Spanish border 2 weeks ago. EU Commissioner for Home Affairs Ylva Johansson and Spanish Interior Minister Fernando Grande Malaska met with Morocco's Interior Minister Abdelwafi Laftit in Rabat to discuss the events of June 24, when hundreds of sub-Saharan migrants and asylum seekers attempted to storm through a border post and scale a border fence into Melilla. In addition to the deaths, more than 70 civilians were injured. We have discussed how we can further cooperate on fighting the smugglers, preventing such violent and dangerous situations as we saw 2 weeks ago, Johansson said in a video message after the meeting. The European Commission has said in response it would enhance police cooperation with Morocco, including with joint investigation Nations. Videos showing black men lying on the ground that day, some motionless and bleeding as Moroccan officers stood over them, sparked public outrage and condemnation from a United Nations chief official.
In our next story, Africa's CDC signs with Pfizer for COVID pill for African countries. Africa's top public health agency said it had signed a memorandum of understanding with Pfizer for countries on the continent to receive supplies of the Paxlovid pill to treat COVID-19. Data from a mid to late stage study last November showed the antiviral medication was nearly 90% effective in preventing hospitalizations and deaths compared with the placebo in adults at high risk of severe illness. Now, we have signed the MOU with Pfizer, and we are going to be able to make that particular treatment available to African countries, said Ahmed Ogwal Omar, the acting director of the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Omar said the MOU would allow African countries to access Paxlovid at cost. The Africa CDC, an agency of the 55-member African Union, had said in March that the MOU was ready but needed to be cleared by its legal office. Now, the World Health Organization has said that deaths in the continent from COVID-19 are expected to fall by nearly 94% in 2022 compared with last year.
Now in Angola, they mourn the death of ex-President Dos Santos. Angolans eulogized former President José Eduardo dos Santos, who died Friday in Spain as a patriot. Angolan President João Lourenço, who is seeking re-election in August, said the country had suffered a big loss. He declared 5 days of national mourning starting Saturday. This is very sad news. He has done a lot for the country, said Luanda resident Santos Camueno, a 40-year-old Mason. Dos Santos was admitted to a hospital in Spain and placed in intensive care after suffering a cardiac arrest on June 23. Namibia's President Hage Geingob called Dos Santos an outstanding revolutionary. Another giant tree has fallen, Geingob said. Portugal's President Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa described him as a decisive protagonist in the relations with Angola's former colonial power. Former Portuguese Prime Minister and ex-head of the European Commission, José Manuel Barroso, recalled a leader of exceptional intelligence who was able to guarantee Angolan national unity. For much of his time at the head of his MPLA party, Dos Santos fought a civil war.
In our next story, concern as Somalis get high on ants. Police in Somalia have classified a particular kind of ant as a drug after discovering that people were steaming the insects and inhaling their vapor to get high. Odorous house ants, whose scientific name is Tapinoma sessile, are known to contain formic acid. There are accounts of birds appearing drunk after eating large quantities of these ants, and a security officer has told TV station Somali Cable that humans are deliberately using it to a similar effect. They put the ants in a pan with the lid on. After it's boiled for a while, people sit around and hover over it, and then they get high, he says. He even suggests that there is now a shortage of these ants because people are going out and looking for them. Doctors, however, warn that coming into contact with formic acid can cause dizziness, nausea, and vomiting. So don't try this at home.
In our next story, Al-Shabaab denies funding jihadists in Mozambique and Nigeria. The Al-Shabaab extremist group has issued a statement denying accusations by Somali President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud that it was funding terrorists in Mozambique and Nigeria. Somali President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud recently suggested that Al-Shabaab funds terrorists in Mozambique as well as in Nigeria, where Boko Haram and ISWAP, an Islamic State-affiliated faction, are based. Hassan Sheikh Mohamud's accusation about funding groups in Mozambique and Nigeria is not only absurd but woefully laughable, reads a reply published on the pro-Al-Shabaab website Somali Memo yesterday, quoted by the BBC. We have evidence that the money collected by Al-Shabaab is used in financing terror groups in Mozambique and Nigeria, with some going to Al-Qaeda, President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud said during a visit to Somali soldiers and police officers training in Turkey. We'll shut down these revenue streams, promised Hassan Sheikh Mohamud, who took office in May this year after serving a first term as president between 2012 and 2017.
That brings us to the end of our top stories. Now, 1/3 of the food produced for human consumption is lost or wasted globally, and this is each year. Now, Capricorn Foundation is figuring out how to combat this in Namibia, and we'll be looking at their conversation with Glenora Shipura after the break.
In NMH Ad Spotter spots the daily adverts in all NMH printed editions from the daily newspapers to the retail specials as well as weekly, monthly and yearly focus editions. If you would like to feature your brand or campaign on this platform, please contact adspotter@synergy.com.na. NMH Ad Spotter. Spot it, like it, buy it.
Now, earlier on, Ashwin highlighted that 1/3 of food produced for human consumption is lost or wasted globally, which amounts to about 1.3 billion tons per year, with approximately $1 trillion. In Namibia, the Capricorn Foundation launched the Food Waste Challenge, and Rikus Grobler, the foundation's manager for innovation, joined Glenora Shipura in conversation to share more on the challenge and how you at home can contribute to lessen food wastage. Let's take a look at this interview.
1/3 of food produced for human consumption is lost or wasted globally. This amounts to about 1.3 billion tons per year, worth approximately $1 trillion. In Namibia, the Capricorn Foundation launched the Food Waste Challenge. Rikus Grobler, the foundation's manager for innovation, explains why it is such a necessary issue to tackle and which should be embraced by all countries in Africa. Good morning and welcome to Africa. Good morning.
Good morning, thank you.
Getting right into it, what would be regarded or defined as food waste?
Okay, so there's an official definition from the United Nations Environmental Programme. I'll try and recite it from from the website. So it basically entails food that makes up the supply chain up to a final product that is of good quality and still fit for consumption, but it still gets discarded, whether it's good for use or not. And it usually, but not exclusively, happen at the manufacturing stage, or the distribution stage, or the retail stage, or the final consumption stage. So that's the formal UNEP definition.
So what is the consequence of food going to waste?
Well, in essence, hunger is a big issue in Namibia. The latest stats, if I remember correctly, we were one of the 36 most hunger countries in the world. And if food gets wasted, it means somebody goes without a meal somewhere. So the big result of this is hunger and unnecessary waste.
Yeah, and Africa is a continent where hunger is constant, right? What can be done to tackle this to benefit the residents in Africa?
Definitely what you say, food waste specifically, I mean, yes, we can produce more food, but food waste to us it's foods that's already been manufactured. It is there for consumption, and still it doesn't get used. So in my view, it's a quick win. I mean, waste not, want not, as the saying goes. So yes, we can produce more, and we can be innovative in production methods to produce more, but making sure that food waste does not actually gets consumed is a quick win. It's already there, and you'll see something. Sometimes it's because of simple things in the system. I mean, just to name one example, if some of the retail stores, it's policy that if a can gets dented or damaged in some manner, they have to discard it, and that food is still good for consumption. So it's simple things that can be tweaked. So food waste is a quick win that can make a big difference. It takes long to tweak a production system or a manufacturing environment or agriculture practices to grow more food. But food waste, it's already there. It's just something that needs to change in the system to make it available for people to eat.
I see that, and so that's more on like the high end, right? What about the ordinary citizen? Like us at home, we're struggling with food shortages, right? I mean, we buy food and then it goes bad after a couple of days and we didn't consume it. And this is a household of like 5 people or etc. So what can the ordinary person on the street do to help manage food wastage?
Yes, so that's a good question. The perception is always that waste happens at the consumption level, people having too much and then throwing it away. And yes, it is a big factor, but I just want to emphasize it's not the only factor. There's a lot of waste that happens in other parts of the supply chain as well. So I think there's many ideas out there. You're talking to the person on the street in terms of how we can resolve this issue. So that's why the Capricorn Foundation specifically launched this challenge, the food waste challenge, for people to be aware of the issue. Firstly, I think awareness already is a big step forward in terms of making sure that you don't buy too much. When you do not use everything, don't just throw it in the bin. See if you can utilize it in some other form to provide a meal to someone. So and then apart from that, these challenges can be solved with human creativity. People have good ideas on what to do. If I can share a quick example, at my work we have a sign there to say that people shouldn't leave their food in the fridge, because if it's still there on the Monday, then it will get thrown away. And somebody printed out the food waste logo and went and pasted just under the sign. And immediately it triggered the idea for somebody to say that, I have an idea. Monday, usually people have big Sunday meals. Bring your leftovers to work, and then we can make up a package of all the leftovers that's still fit for consumption, and distribute that to a beneficiary or a vulnerable person somewhere. So that idea, it came from a person who saw this opportunity. So the idea of the challenge is to source this kind of solutions from the people who lives in the world where these things happen.
Yeah.
So,
all right.
yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us on this lovely morning.
Great,
We
thank
have
you.
just been speaking to Rikus Grobler from the Namibia Capricorn Foundation, who speaks to us on the importance of food waste management.
Thank you for staying with Africa. Good morning. Right now, we're going to cross over to Zimbabwe and have a conversation with Talent Gore about the news on the ground. Talent, wabukase.
Tamuka dukana mamkao, mamkase Africa.
Tamuka yedu. Now, Talent, I don't know if these two things are correlated, but for the last 2 years, we've seen countless strikes by Zimbabwean teachers, which is what makes me curious about free education rollout happening next year. I assume this is according to the government. Could you please delve into that?
Learners from underprivileged communities will be the first beneficiaries of free education beginning next year under a state-funded basic education program. This follows an extensive nationwide study to establish the costs involved. And the 3-year study will cover 20 schools, 2 in each province. It also sought to classify public schools by location and learners' level of need, among other things. We have also gathered that the program will be funded through state grants to learning institutions that schools will receive tuition and school development levies from parents and guidance. The government has, however, firmly of this program in batches, so they're going to be with for, but at first they're going to start with 20 under government said that program.
The Evening Review is a daily interview-based talk show that dissects and expounds on current affairs as they occur in Namibia. The show aims at reaching Namibians of all age groups who seek better understanding of the state of current affairs in the country. This show is broadcasted on NTV, 1up2.com and cross-shared on the following Facebook platforms: Namibian Sun and Namibia Media Holdings. The Evening Review focuses on interviews, latest news and up-to-the-minute current events. Contact evening at synergy.com.na. Evening Review, unpacking today's pertinent issues.
We'd like to apologize to our viewers for that slight technical disruption. We believe Talent Gore is able to speak to us now. Talent, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Ashwin.
All right, okay. If you could please just finish off the tail end of your story about free education rollout next year before we get into the story about 2 people having been injured in a crossfire.
So the government said that they will roll out the free education program early next year. So this is probably in January and February, and they're going to be starting with 20 schools, 2 in each province, and they're going to start with underprivileged schools, and they will go on and on until they reach a certain target that they have set for themselves.
All right, and if you could go on to the story of the crossfire.
So 2 people were seriously injured after they were hit by a stray bullet when police exchanged fire with robbery suspects in Chitungwiza. Police received a tip-off and located the suspect at a shopping center in Chitungwiza, and the suspect noticed detectives approaching and drew an pistol from his jacket and pointed it to the detectives. In response, the detectives fired a warning shot into the air and later shot towards the suspect, but they missed him. The suspect dropped the pistol and fled into the bushes, where he got into an unregistered red Honda Fit vehicle and drove off towards Chitungwiza Highway Road. After about an hour, it emerged that the bullet, which missed the suspect, hit Tashinga Mgwara and Pamela Mchazorwe. The 2 victims sustained serious injuries and are currently at Chitungwiza Hospital and Paringatko Group of Hospitals. The Zimbabwe Republic Police issued a statement saying that they were deeply concerned by the incident that happened in Chitungwiza, and they are going to take care of the bills of the victims that were shot by the stray bullets.
All right. Now, opposition legislators Job Sikala and Gotv Sithole were yesterday denied bail at the High Court in a case they are accused of inciting public violence. And also Amnesty International Zimbabwe calls for a death sentence ban. Can you please go into these 2 stories, Talent?
Well, opposition party Citizens Coalition for Change legislators Job Sikala and Godfrey Stoll have been denied bail. They were arrested 22 days ago at More Blessing Ali's funeral, where they are being accused for inciting violence at the funeral. In denying them bail, Justice Lucy Mgwara said their grounds of appeal have no merit. The pair has been in custody for 22 days following their arrest on June 14 on charges of inciting public violence that erupted in Nyatsime following the murder of Citizens Coalition for Change activist More Blessing Ali by an alleged ZANU-PF activists. So apparently the 2 are still in police custody. They are still in police custody, and they have been denied bail by the magistrate court, and the magistrate court say that they should apply for bail at the High Court, and the High Court is still denying them bail. Apparently there are actually 13 CCCC activists who were arrested on the funeral of More Blessing Ali on June for.
All right, and if you could get into your last story, please, as briefly as possible.
The Amnesty International is pushing for a ban of the death penalty, which it says has caused a lot of stress on people that are on the death row. Capital punishment is provided for in Section 12 of the Constitution of Zimbabwe, and it states that it shall be lawful for a person to be killed following a death sentence imposed on him or her by a court. Apparently, there are people who are on the death row, but they haven't been charged, they haven't been sentenced to death. And the Amnesty International Zimbabwe is calling for the removal of the death penalty, saying that it is causing stress amongst the people who are on the death row. So we're going to be monitoring the situation to see if the Zimbabwean government, to see if the legislators will try to remove the death penalty.
All right, yeah, I remember a time former Attorney General Sobiso Gulandebele was also fighting that. Thank you very much, Talent Gotv, for bringing us the stories from Zimbabwe.
You're welcome, and thank you very much for having me.
It's always good to have you on Africa Good Morning. Something else that's good to have is good weather, but you know, you have no control over that. You can check out the forecast with Diana and I up next.
Of course, you can always trust Africa Good Morning to take you on a trip across Southern Africa. We were just in Zimbabwe speaking to Talent Gore, but now we move on over to Zambia, where we speak to Mr. Mike Sichula to give us the news on the ground. Good morning, Mr. Sichula.
Good morning, thank you.
All right, starting off in your first story, the World Bank has reclassified Zambia to low-income status from lower middle income for the 2023 financial year. Can you please get into this for us?
Yes, the development was announced by the Finance Minister, Dr. Msumbeko Msokotwane, who said that the government will resolve to work to resolve this situation at the next assessment or in the middle term. So what has happened is that the previous administration had projected that Zambia should become a middle-income country by 2030. So with this development, it simply shows that Zambia is sliding back some 2 steps behind, and there's been a lot of concerns from members of the public regarding this classification. Others are saying it is due to mismanagement by the previous administration, while others are saying maybe the government had planned that they should come to this status so that the country can begin to push for debt cancellation. As you know, Zambia owes the international community close to $22.25 billion United States dollars. So this is something that the government has also not stated what action will be taken in order to reverse this situation at the next assessment or in the middle term.
All right, I'm very curious to see if Namibia was also successful in their bid to change their status. Now, a motion has been moved in Parliament which, if approved, will make children below the age of 14 innocent of criminal offences. Could you please tell us about that, Mike?
Yeah, this was tabled by the Minister of Justice, Mulambo Hainde, who presented the bill to amend the Penal Code of 1951 for the first reading on Thursday last week, where he was asking members of parliament to reverse the age of criminal responsibility of the child. So presently, they are saying a child who is below the age of 14 will no longer, they want to make that situation where a child who is below the age of 14 to be innocent of criminal offenses. The present status is about 8 years. So they want to change this from 8 years to about 14 years because of the situations where a child under the age of 14 is not criminally responsible for an act or omission in the 1951 Act, which was amended in 1953. So they are trying to change this so that a person below the age of 12 is not, a person below the age of 14 does not become face criminal offenses. So this is something that a number of CSOs that are advocating for children's rights are beginning to discuss, considering that we have had cases where children below the age of 14 or below the age of 8 have committed serious criminal offenses, such as maybe accidentally hitting one of their friends and this person dies. So what happens? So this is something that the members of parliament begin to debate from this week to see whether it will become law.
All right. Of course, we'll be keeping an ear out for an update on that. Now, at least 3,500 visitors are expected in Lusaka to attend the fourth mid-year coordination meeting of the Africa Union starting on Thursday this week. Can you please tell us about this?
Yes, the African Union conference has attracted close to 13 heads of states that are expected to come into the country. And according to information shared by the Ministry of Information, they are saying they are projecting that the capital city, Lusaka, will receive close to 3,500 visitors. And one good thing about this is that when the AU team visited Zambia, they were happy with the hospitality industry because Zambia has built in the last 5 years. Zambia has seen a lot of mega hotels coming up in Lusaka. So in terms of accommodation, Zambia is on the right side of history. Visitors that are going to come to Zambia will not be affected by accommodation. Then the transportation issues government has put in place, all the logistical issues. Then according to also information from the Ministry of Finance, the country is expected to spend close to 100 million kwacha to host this event. So this is something that is a big event for the tourism industry and also the local business sector, because they are going to cash in through taxes, restaurants, and across all sectors of national development.
Indeed, yeah, that's a good win for Lusaka right there. Now, finally, Mike, as briefly as you can, give us the latest on the Copper Queens in Morocco.
Well, the Copper Queens have qualified to the quarterfinals, and they'll be playing against Senegal on Wednesday this week, which if the Copper Queens will emerge victorious, they're going to qualify to the World Cup to be hosted by Australia and New Zealand. So already the Copper Queens have so far pocketed $4,500 for qualifying from the group stages. Remember, the team has played 3 matches. They have not lost. They have only conceded against their other opponents. That was so this is something that the number of soccer fans are excited and are hoping that the Copper Queens are going to do better so that they go to the World Cup. So it is something that has gotten a lot of Zambians talking, and they are now comparing their performance to the senior national team who are participating at the COSAFA, where they'll be facing Botswana. So it is something that a number of soccer fans are excited. I expect that the Copper Queens are going to beat Senegal this Wednesday so that they qualify for the World Cup and eventually maybe push to lift the continental title.
All right, wishing the Copper Queens the best of luck. Thank you so much, Mr. Mike Sichula, for giving us all the latest stories on the ground in Zambia.
Thank you very much, Africa. Good morning.
All right, we're now going to take a quick ad break, and when we return, we get into our economic news. Stay with us.
AgriMonitor is jou weeklikse landboukundige program wat jou die jongste nuus in die landbouverwante bedryf en onderwerpe wat daaraan gekoppel is, bring. Vir enige advertensie of nuusverwante navraag, kontak agrimonitor@synergy.com.na.
Thank you for staying with Africa. Good morning. Heading into economic news stories, no improvement in food nutrition in Tanzania, says the UN. Despite huge investments in agricultural-related infrastructure like irrigation schemes, roads and storage, a UN report shows that Tanzania is yet to improve food dietary diversity, affordability and access to healthy diets. This is according to a report dubbed The State of Food Security and Nutrition in the World 2022, repurposing food and agricultural policies to make healthy diets more affordable, which was released on Wednesday as an annual flagship report jointly prepared by UN agencies. The study suggested that while the said investment was commendable, it doesn't necessarily guarantee success, as it will need to be accompanied by other measures which include extension services, support for food and agricultural marketing, and promotion of nutritious food. Now, the report further emphasized that when repurposing public support to make healthy diets less costly, policymakers have to avoid potential inequality trade-offs that may emerge if farmers are not in a position to specialize in the production of nutritious foods due to resource constraints. The government is required to increase and prioritize expenditure on provision of services that support food and agriculture more collectively.
Now in our next story, cocoa buyers back Ivory Coast and Ghana's cocoa premium schemes. Major cocoa buyers have agreed to pay a premium and back a price floor on cocoa sold by Ivory Coast and Ghana as part of an agreement reached on Friday to combat poverty among farmers. Cocoa industry players will back a fixed living income differential of $400 a ton on all cocoa contracts sold by Ivory Coast or Ghana, two top global cocoa producers. Buyers will also pay a country premium that will enable cocoa regulators in both countries to reach a target floor price of $2,600 per ton, which should allow farmers to earn a minimum of 70% of the target floor price. Signatories include Hershey, Mars, Bloma Chocolate, Nestle, Suckden, Mondelez, Teuton, Berry Callebaut, Cargill, Ferrero, Alarm and Ecom Trading. Both countries have struggled to achieve that price target, prompting the Côte d'Ivoire Ghana Cocoa Initiative to work with the industry on a price mechanism. Companies in the cocoa value chain have met with the governments of Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana to renew support for the LID as a starting point towards the pathway to achieving living incomes for farmers, the CIGCI in both countries' cocoa regulators said in a joint statement.
Now, in the last of our economic news stories, Elon Musk pulls out of $44 billion deal to buy Twitter. Elon Musk is seeking to end his $44 billion bid to buy Twitter, alleging multiple breaches of the agreement. The announcement is the latest twist in a long-running saga after the world's richest person decided to buy Twitter in April. Musk said he had backed out because Twitter failed to provide enough information on the number of spam and fake accounts. Now, Twitter says it plans to pursue legal action to enforce the agreement. The Twitter board is committed to closing the transaction on the price and terms agreed upon with Mr. Musk. Twitter chairman Brett Taylor wrote in a tweet, the billionaire businessman had asked for evidence to back the company's assertion that spam and bot accounts make up less than 5%. Now, spam accounts are designed to spread information to large numbers of people and manipulate the way they interact with the platform. That brings us to the end of our economic news stories. Up next, economic indicators. You are still with Africa. Good morning. Now we would like to officially congratulate Namibia's Valvicious national rugby team for qualifying for the 7th time in a row for the Rugby World Cup by beating Kenya 36-0 just yesterday. Ari Hochad, however, has the rest of the sports news. Good morning, Ari. Take it away.
Yes, very good morning, Ashwin. Yes, great performance by Namibian rugby team. Well done, Johan Duisel and coach Alistair Coetzee, 7th World Cup. In good company. Novak Djokovic also won his 7th Wimbledon, so in good company. Looks like 7 is a good number. Anyway, we'll get to the tennis. Let's start with football, with the soccer. South African women's team still doing good in the AFCON, the African Nations Cup. And that was because they beat Botswana. That was last night. A very tough game for them. They only scored the winner in the 80th minute. They won by 1-0 against Botswana. They through to the quarterfinals. Also last night, Nigeria beat Burundi easily by 4-0. So now the quarterfinals has been set. That will be on Wednesday. It will be Zambia against Senegal, and then also Morocco, the host, against Botswana. And then on Thursday, it is Cameroon against Nigeria. Big game, that one. And then also South Africa, Tunisia. That will be on Thursday. On to the tennis news, and like I said, Novak Djokovic, the Wimbledon champion, he beat Nick Kyrgios in the final. That was the men's final, and that's his 7th win, his 4th consecutive win, beating Nick Kyrgios, playing in his first final. Kyrgios known to be making a bit of trouble on the court in the tournament. He behaved okay, but in the ceremony he put on a red cap just to irritate the All England tennis lawn people a little bit. But anyway, good result for Novak Djokovic. In the women's draw, it was Elena Rybakina. There she is. She's from Kazakhstan. She beat Tunisia's Ons Jabeur in the final by 3-6, 6-2, 6-2. Quite emotional for Rybakina as well. In 2018, she became a citizen of Kazakhstan. She's Russian-born. So it was a difficult media conference also for her. Obviously, the media zooming in on her roots as being a Russian tennis player, and the Russians weren't allowed to play at Wimbledon, but the first ever Grand Slam win for Rybakina. Great result for her. On to Formula One racing, and I think the big news from Austria is that Mercedes-Benz is definitely back. They ended in 3rd position with Lewis Hamilton on the podium again. The winner, Charles Leclerc in Ferrari. Great dominant win, actually. He overtook Max Verstappen of Red Bull, that came in second 3 times in the race. So that doesn't happen too often. And now it is Max Verstappen that leads the points by 208. Charles Leclerc is just 38 points behind on 170, and Sergio Perez on 151. Constructors, Red Bull 359 and Ferrari 303. It was the other 2 drivers of Red Bull and Ferrari that didn't finish, Sergio Perez and Carlos Sainz of Ferrari. Both of them had to withdraw with mechanical failures and an accident for Sergio Perez early in the race. On to some rugby news, and it was not a good day for Southern African rugby teams. There is the Springboks hanging their heads. They lost 13 points to 12. That was in Bloemfontein against Wales. That was not a good result for the Springboks, and the same happened in Australia and New Zealand. Ireland beat the All Blacks by 23 points to 12. England beat Australia 25-17, and then Scotland also beat Argentina 29 points to 6. And it was France that beat Japan by 20 points to 15. So all the Southern Hemisphere teams that had a victory this weekend, or to play for this coming weekend. It's all 3 test series, and the final game for South Africa against Wales will be this coming Saturday. That will be in the Cape Town Stadium, DHL Stadium in Cape Town. Let's close off real quickly with golf news as well. It was the Scottish Open that took place that is in East Lothian, and that is Xander Schauffele. Xander Schauffele winning. He's from the USA. He won the Scottish Open, a total of 7 under par, just 1 shot ahead of his countryman Kurt Katayama. And then the Southern African interest did well. Christian Besaidnout -1. Dean Burmeister -2. He's a Zimbabwean-born South African. And then Jordan Spieth, the other well-known, also -2. The British Open, that is one of the big ones probably one of the biggest ones on the golf calendar, will start this Thursday at St Andrews. So that is something to look forward to this week. That's the sports news for today. Hope you have a brilliant day. And again, congratulations to Namibia qualifying for the World Cup. They play in Group A against France, also against New Zealand, Italy, and Uruguay. So we talk again tomorrow. All the best. Bye-bye.
All right, cheers, Ari. But you know what? The last time I watched Namibia play New Zealand, perhaps 2 World Cups ago, they put on a very brave performance. After all, they do come from the land of the brave. This is Still Africa. Good morning. Your highlights come after the break.
Careers Bistro focuses on the movers and shakers in the corporate world. It takes the content of the Careers Hub that is inserted every Friday in the 3 NMH dailies, Republikane, Namibian Sun, and Algemeine Zeitung, to viewers on social media. This show is broadcasted on NTV, oneup2.com, and cross-shared on the following Facebook platforms: Careers Hub, the Republikane, Algemeine Zeitung, Namibian Sun, and Namibia Media Holdings. Careers Bistro focuses on car interviews, career motivational videos, the ups and downs of different careers, keeping in touch with business, and more. For career-related content or advertising queries, please contact zone@synergy.com.na.
Thank you for staying with Africa Good Morning. As always, we end off the show with the highlights from today's broadcast, just in case you missed them. Soweto Tavern deaths rise to 15 as 2 shot dead in Katlehong. In Sri Lanka, President Rajapaksa to resign after palace stormed. 1-year-old shot allegedly by mourners firing guns at gravesite in Mpumalanga. Kenya raises criminal age of responsibility to 12. Paul Kagame to seek 4th term as president of Rwanda. No improvement in food nutrition in Tanzania, says UN.
That's been our show. And remember, Africa Good Morning repeats from 8:30 on DSTV 285, Gotv 94, and oneup2.com. Don't be afraid to share your comments with us on Facebook and Twitter. We'd love to interact with you. And of course, do sanitize, do stay safe out there. From Diana Master and myself, Ashwin Berry, Swera Jaganaka.